Hello and welcome to Racing News 365 answers your fan questions ahead of this weekend's Canadian Grand Prix. For this video, myself, Nick Golding, cannot do it alone, so joining me to answer your fan questions is none other than the awesome duo that is 2023 Young Journalist of the Year, Sam absolutely Coop, and he's done the piece but very delayed, and the man, the myth, the legend, that is lead editor Ian Parks. Ian, this is your first fan questions video, I think, of the year. So I'll come to you first.
Really? Wow.
I think it is. It's kind of been mine and Sam's video, it feels, this year, because normally we record this when you're traveling back from somewhere in the globe.
It was very nearly yours and Sam's video again. You know, I just had to rattle off another story that needed doing very, very quickly. But yes, we are doing our predictions in this video. So they're coming up later, folks. We didn't do them in the podcast this week.
We are. I will come to you first on something, Ian, because this is, in many ways, the biggest motorsport week of the year, because it's not only the Canadian Grand Prix, it is, of course, also Le Mans 24 Hours Week. The race gets underway at 4 p.m. Central European time on Saturday, can close 24 hours on Sunday. This is, for any motorsport fan, arguably the biggest week in the calendar.
Huge. It's just, I think I mentioned in our wonderful podcast with Seb Buemi this week. Please catch that, folks. Listening, watching. It was a really great show. So thank you again to Seb. It is really such a shame that we have to have what is one of the best Grand Prix on the calendar in my book. Bearing in mind, it always produces action. You're guaranteed something to happen around the Circuit Gilles Villeneuve in Montreal. And then, of course, yes, we have the Le Mans 24 hours. Yeah, I know the Le Mans or the Canadian Grand Prix on Sunday starts a couple of hours after Le Mans. That's okay. But of course, we have the qualifying. The start of the race clashes with qualifying, doesn't it, on Saturday? So I get that. I still do think that they should be separated. I do think that would be ideal for both events, just to guarantee maximum audience. But yes, it is a momentous weekend. One I'm totally looking forward to. I know you're looking forward to it, Nick, because I know how much you love your Le Mans.
I enjoy it.
And you've been really advocating our push for Le Mans content this week. So that's all good with me.
To be fair, I never really watched. I used to always see the start and the end. I never really watched the full thing until a couple of years ago, and more so last year when obviously covering it with Racing News 365, and I kind of put myself through the full 24 hours and was just engrossed in it. But as Ian just pointed out, Sam, we have got the Canadian Grand Prix this weekend, which actually, compared to the majority of the races, it is traditionally every year one of the best on the calendar.
It is. It's a fan favorite as well. Whenever you kind of ask or even speak to people, you know, like us who work in F1, it's one of those races that comes up as, there's changeable weather, as we saw, 2011. Who can possibly forget that race? That's going to be, favorite. Kind of. It was actually, it's going to be mentioned for
one of my all-time faves
for decades to come. So changeable weather. It's a circuit that lends to some, fun overtaking. I mean, Alex Albon's overtaking maneuver on two cars at the same time last year being a good example of the kind of action you can get. It's, there's high jeopardy at the start. You look at, I think it was 97 and 98. We had a couple of big crashes. We're, going on for 30 years ago now. But it's one of those races that just seems to conjure something up. 99, the Wall of Champions. You can go on, so on and so forth. Lewis's first win, Robert Kubica's win. There's all these amazing, kind of historic moments in Formula One history that have happened at the Circuit Gilles Villeneuve. So it is a place that holds a lot of memories for everyone who watches F1 or works in F1. And it's just a special weekend on the calendar.
And you can tell it's a special weekend based on the number of fan questions we've had sent in, of which, as always, we have selected 5 from it at random, and 5 brilliant questions. So thank you to those who sent them in. And the first question comes from Mo, and I like this question. Who is under more pressure with Max being just 1 point away from a race ban? Max or Red Bull? Who wants to tackle that one?
Gotta think that Red Bull are going to be very, very nervous these next 2 weekends. They know that, as we've just seen in the Spanish Grand Prix, Max has his moments. He let the red mist descend. He allowed, George came at him into turn one, as we all know. I'm not going to go over the whole dynamics as to what happened. We all can remember what happened now. And he was told to let the place back. He exploded, loads of profanity, and he tried to dive into George. He made a misjudgment in allowing George back, went straight into the side of him, 10-second penalty, 10 to the checkered flag. It's severely damaged championship hopes, 49 points adrift. And for me, you would have thought that it only takes a moment like that across any stage of these next 2 Grand Prix weekends in Canada or Austria, and Max has got a penalty, and he'll pick up a race point or whatever on his license. That's him banned for 1 Grand Prix, and then all of a sudden Red Bull has got to reshuffle its pack to accommodate that. So for me, Red Bull.
And it's actually an interesting point, and then I'll come to you, Sam, in a second, because actually you just mentioned there, Ian, that, yes, Max has to get through these next 2 races without an incident to avoid a race ban. But actually, even if he does avoid an incident, he's then got to go all the way until October before the next points are removed from his license. And so many more races to get through. And it is an interesting point, Sam, isn't it? That, who does face the most pressure from Max maybe getting a race ban? Is it Max himself or actually Red Bull, given what they would have to deal with from the outfall?
Well, the pressure will be more directly on Max because he is ultimately the one in the car, and he can decide his own fate from that perspective. I think it's probably more uneasy being a Red Bull's situation because you don't have that element of control. You can't be like, well, this is we're determining our destiny here, whereas Max is the one in control. What will make Red Bull nervous is Max isn't the first driver we've seen drive into the side of someone deliberately by the looks of it. But with Michael Schumacher, for example, it almost felt more deliberate, more calculated. Like it was almost more predictable that he would do something like that. Whereas I think Red Bull, or at least with what happened in Spain, there was an element of it was just this flash, this flashpoint, this heat of the moment decision that Max made. So I'm not sure Red Bull will particularly, kind of know how he's going to respond to any kind of given moment. You'd think he'd be smarter than to get involved in an incident like we saw in Spain again.
Absolutely. Agree with that.
There's so many things that can happen over a Grand Prix weekend that could get you, let's call it an innocent penalty point on your super license for a mistake. Something happens, there's a number of different scenarios in which Max could inadvertently get another penalty point. And yeah, as you say, Nick, the jeopardy doesn't end there after Austria. He's got until October to navigate without getting, I think he drops down to 9, but you could easily then kind of get back up towards that 12 mark because of his, it's his flurry of incidents he had with Lando Norris in the back end of last year. After that point, if he can survive till then, his situation gets much easier. But yeah, so it's going to be an uneasy few months, even if they get past Canada and Austria.
Mo, thank you very much for the question. Coming on to the next one from Ellie. At the moment, who is your favourite for the F1 driver's title this season? I'll go first. And at the start of the year, I said Max Verstappen. That's changed for me. And actually, I can't look past the cool, calm and collected Oscar Piastri, who just seems to be taking everything in his stride. And when he does get pegged back, like he did in Imola, he just bounces back. Who wants to go first? Sam, go on.
Let's see if Sam's going to vouch for George Russell.
Look, George will come good at some point. To be fair, George could well be the favourite for the title next year. HPP, we're expecting are going to do a really good job when it comes to the Mercedes
That
power.
wasn't the question.
But I'm just defending myself. I'm not, obviously, I can't in good faith answer George right now, 4th in the championship, however many points behind Oscar. Yeah, you're right. You can't get past Oscar. He is unflappable. He is unfazed by seemingly whatever is thrown at him from Lando or Max. So I'm going to go with Oscar, but I'm going to caveat it by saying I still don't think we can rule out Lando because we have 15 rounds to go.
He's only 10 points behind. I mean,
exactly.
That's a statement of the blindingly obvious.
I know, but
just caveat it by saying we can't rule out Max Verstappen either because he's 49 behind.
Yeah. Okay, my point has been affected by Nick's adamant kind of Lando's out of this from a few weeks ago.
Still want it,
but yeah. So it's the favourite you have to look at as Oscar, not only because he has a albeit slight advantage, but the way in which he has conducted himself, as you touched upon, Nick, this year lends towards him having control and having the the tools in his toolbox to deal with whatever is coming down the pipeline from, as I said, Max or Lando. That's why I'm going Oscar, not obviously because of the advantage. But yeah, Lando could very much turn around.
In for you?
At this stage, you've got to say Oscar. I mean, it's hard to shy away from making that judgment simply because of the way he has performed, the way he has given off this very cool, calm, collected persona, as has already been mentioned. Whereas Lando, as we have touched on, constantly prone to these little mistakes. And these are really undermining him. And he knows that. We saw it across the Spanish Grand Prix weekend. Little mistakes in Q3 cost him that pole lap. Slow off the line, cost him again going into turn one. So unless he's able to eradicate these and do it quickly and consistently, he can be forgiven for the odd little error here or there. But when they build up over a weekend like they did in Spain, that's when they cost him severely. So, as I say, if he can eradicate them, and I think he has got it in his armory, in his locker to do so, then he's going to be tough to beat. But at this stage, after 9 Grand Prix, and viewing the two alongside one another, it's definitely advantage Oscar, and it's hard to shy away from going with him right now.
Ellie, thank you for your question, Sam. Quickly.
But write Max Verstappen off at your peril.
At your peril.
Because
exactly.
a Max Verstappen with a chip on his shoulder, as he will have now after the Spanish Grand Prix, oh boy. Like
I wouldn't even go so far as to say chip on his shoulder. I'm going to say wounded Max Verstappen. I think a wounded Max Verstappen is a dangerous animal. Yeah. And it wouldn't surprise me if we see him come roaring back.
Well, we can do those predictions in just one moment because we're going to do one more question first, then we'll do that. And this next question comes from Zahir. If you could add one current racing driver who has never raced in F1 to the grid, who would it be and why? I'll give you 2 seconds to think because I've got quite an easy one who pops into my head who has done FP1 sessions and I'm pretty sure young driver tests in F1 before, but never raced. And that's Robert Schwartzman, who obviously very, very talented in F3, very, very fast in F2, recently claimed pole for the Indy 500, of course, had a bit of a disastrous race, but nevertheless a driver who I think, had he been given the chance, would have really shown in F1. Ian, do you want to go next?
Hard to move away from some of the top IndyCar drivers, isn't it? Like Scott Dixon or an Alex Palou. I'm sure Sam was nodding in agreement there, and I'm sure he might have swayed with one or the other. I mean, Sam's done a story today, and we're recording this on it is Monday.
It is Monday.
I think long and hard then. Sam's done a story today about Alex Palou, haven't you, Sam?
Yep.
Yeah, done a story on Alex Palou, and Alex basically turned around and saying, of course he'd love an F1 opportunity, but the last thing he wants is to sit in an F1 car for 3 or 4 years and be struggling to win in that car. And, so he'd want to be jumping in the front-running machinery straight away, but you would assume that those guys like a Scott or an Alex are not going to be given their opportunity to go straight into a front-running car. It's going to be with Cadillac or another team a bit further down the grid, maybe. So for me, I would really like to see one of those two guys because they're at the head of their game right now in their chosen field, but it's unfortunately not going to happen.
Sam.
Yeah, I mean, been somewhat primed by writing about Alex Palou earlier to bring him up. But I mean, the Robert Schwartzman pick is a very interesting one because someone I know at Prema was saying that within the team, Robert Schwartzman was the driver they could never understand not breaking through. He was the one that they were like, he's the one who got away. And think of the talent that Prema have had going through that system over the last decade. So that is a real kind of show of faith in Robert's abilities. I mean, to be honest, Ian's kind of mentioned the other two I was going to mention was Alex and also Scott Dixon, who has tested an F1 car before 20 years ago. Which shows
he's probably a bit old now for F1.
But
another
driver,
Brad Pitt can do it, so can Scott Dixon. That's all.
I mean, if Ted Kravitz can do it, so can Scott Dixon.
Hello, Ted.
Hello, Ted. Yeah, hope you enjoyed the test. For me, Carl Larson, I think, would be a brilliant guy to see in an F1 car because of some of that narrative around I'm the best driver in the world and a little bit of that kind of showmanship that we've seen across these different series. And NASCAR obviously is races on ovals like IndyCar, but it's a very different animal to single seater racing. And so it'd be really fascinating to see how he would transfer to that. Obviously, he has done his stints in IndyCar, or at least the Indy 500. So he's another name that I would kind of vie towards. So yeah, I think you have to kind of go along with the main single seat guys. Is there anyone from Formula E that you would be kind of inclined to see racing? And I know obviously a lot of them are Formula F1 drivers.
I was going to say most of that field have already raced.
There's a lot of Formula F1. To be honest, Oliver Rowland is one, in all fairness, who is doing what nobody's ever done before and literally dominating a series. He could wrap up the title in a few weeks. And he's one who actually, even being friends with him, with Max Verstappen, even Max has pointed out before that if Ollie were to be an F1, he would surprise a lot of people.
It has been mentioned in the past before.
Yeah. Even maybe the likes of Nick Cassidy as well, very successful in Japan in Super Formula, has been a Formula E runner-up a couple of times. Obviously, DTM, very successful over there as well. So there are a few names that would be interesting to see going forwards, as obviously more F2 drivers go to Formula E rather than F1 because of the lack of seats. If any of those are maybe people destined for F1 but actually don't go there because there's not enough seats and instead go to Formula E. A very interesting question. Thank you very much to Zahir for that one. We're going to pause this video quickly and come back to our last two questions because it is time for us to do our Racing News 365 predictions for the Canadian Grand Prix. And we do have, obviously, as always, somebody representing the fans, which is Fleur from Belgium. Fleur, thank you very much for representing the fans for the Canadian Grand Prix. Fleur has predicted that Oscar Piastri will claim a pole position, that Charles Leclerc will finish third in the race, Piastri in second, and that Lando Norris will win. Fleur also thinks that Gabriel Bortoleto will finish 10th, which I quite like, and that Ferrari will claim the fastest pit stop, no surprise there, and that Lewis Hamilton will set the fastest lap. Sam, you can go first because I need some time to think.
Okay, so well, I mean, Max had a strong race here last year, so theory is that Red Bull will be at least somewhat decent and somewhat competitive. It always is in his hands, let's face it. But yeah, I'm going to go pole position, Lando Norris. Top three, Max will win. Oscar will finish second. Lando will finish third. Fastest lap, I mean, it's toss up between Ferrari and Stake. If you're going by the previous however many rounds, let's go with Ferrari because it's safe. Fastest lap, I'm going to go with Carlos Sainz. Why not?
Okay.
And we all know who I'm going with for. I mean, Ian's face has already made me feel nervous about the Carlos Sainz pick, but you've got to choose someone. 10th, Yuki Tsunoda.
Interesting. Ian, go on, you can go next. I'll go last.
You know what? This is a really fascinating one because who can recall what happened in qualifying last year in Canada?
George and Max got exactly the same lap time. And even more pleasing, it was 1:12 dead. It was exactly to the millisecond.
1:12, exactly 72 seconds. Yeah, dead. And obviously George got pole because he set his time first. So on that basis,
George could be,
and bearing in mind that Mercedes is a much improved car this year, it should be good in those conditions as well. Bearing in mind what conditions we might get around Montreal on a Saturday afternoon, who knows? But considering that, if let's say the weather is fair, I'm gonna, you know what? I'm gonna roll the dice. I'm gonna go something different. I'm gonna go for George on pole. Yeah. However, the race, I think it should have been Lando's victory last year, but we all know what happened with the pit stop. When he should have got called in, didn't. And so I'm going to go Lando victory. I think this is also a Lando track more than Oscar. So I'm going to go Lando Max, Oscar. I'm not even going to go George top 3, unfortunately. So even though he's got pole, but I'm not even going to go George top 3. So there you go. Yeah, Lando 1, Max 2, Oscar 3. I'm going to keep going with Ferrari because they've been the team to beat in the pit stops. Fastest lap, Lando. And then 10th position, I'm going to go Fernando.
Okay,
He
so
almost did it for me in Spain. But
for Max.
But for that Max penalty.
That did hurt you. So
the pain is palpable.
Which, do you know what? It's going to be one of those moments at the end of the season. If I lose this by a point, that's going to be the thing I'm always going to come back to.
You should tell Max that at the end of the season. But Max, just want you to know.
Max will really care.
You cost me the title. You cost me the prediction title on Racing News 365. Let's see what happens.
But what would be really funny is if he also finishes, within 10 points, say, of Oscar, and you go, not only did it cost you the title, it also cost me the title.
It cost me the title, yeah.
Right, moving swiftly on to my predictions. And this might be, in all fairness, I think the hardest one of the season so far, because there are so many ways you can go. But I'm going to go Lando on pole because, he was mighty quick last season in pretty much all conditions, and the McLaren is the best car on the grid at the moment this season. I'm glad you two have gone first because it's given me a chance to look up the weather forecast. And Sunday is meant to be, at the moment,
insider information.
It changes. It's meant to be wet in Montreal, which means I'm obviously going to go for a Max Verstappen win. I'm going to go for Oscar in second and Lando in third. I'm going to say Pierre Gasly to finish in 10th, Max to set the fastest lap, and Red Bull the fastest pit stop because they are getting better, actually, in all fairness. So there we go. Let's see what happens. But as we know, the weather changes so quickly in Montreal, it is likely now going to be a heat wave and no rain whatsoever. And that will be my predictions in the bin. Right, back to the final two questions to whiz through very quickly. And Ian, I'm going to come to you on this one because the topic you've kind of discussed a little bit in recent podcasts, and it comes from Jack. Do you think the Charles Leclerc Lewis Hamilton partnership is working at Ferrari? It appears they get on off track, but have already had multiple moments on track.
With regard to, thank you very much for the question. Good question. I think with regard to the latter comment, this is still a bedding in period for these two guys. Yes, they get on off track because they have numerous activities, hobbies that they enjoy, music, fashion, etc. So we know that there was always going to be that dynamic between them, that despite the age gap, that there was going to be plenty of things that they could discuss and deliberate over, shall we say. And with regard to their on-track stuff, they're still new. They're still learning about one another. It's a very different dynamic. We're talking about two A-list drivers here within the same team. Okay, Charles hasn't won a driver's title yet, but nevertheless, he is very highly regarded inside Ferrari. He has won multiple Grand Prix with the Scuderia. Lewis has gone there as a 7-time F1 champion. I'm not saying he's done it, got the T-shirt, etc., and he's coming across as the big I am. I don't see Lewis doing that inside Ferrari, but nevertheless, there are going to be different ways of working. Because Charles is used to that team, Lewis isn't. Different dynamic with Lewis and his race engineer, Riccardo Adami, where, of course, Charles quite clearly knows his race engineer for many years now. So you're always going to get these little bit of friction between them on occasion. I don't see that changing anytime soon, but it will over a period of time where they're going to get far more comfortable with one another. There's still going to be, when I say I don't see it changing anytime soon, just to clarify, there are always going to be these little moments between them. Got to expect, particularly bearing in mind they're very close on track. They're pretty much occupying, let's say, the third row of the grid, bearing in mind third, fourth row of the grid, depending on where the rivals are. So they're always going to be very close. So I do think, as I say, it will get better, and that cohesiveness that often develops between teammates will improve.
And Sam, I'll come to you on the final question. That comes from Bethany. Has Franco Colapinto's performances surprised you since he returned?
Yes and no. I think we were never going to see a notable step up from Jack Doohan's performance, at least straight away. A driver coming into a new car, they're going to need a little bit of time. I think the way that Franco hit the ground running so quickly at Williams last year was maybe a little bit, I don't think false dawn is the right phrase, but I think it maybe gave a false representation or a false reading. And the expectation was therefore maybe somewhat elevated from where it should have been for him, because he will need that adjustment period. Remember, he had spent a lot of time, in the Williams Academy prior to that. So I think the big thing is that he's now in a situation where he was asked three things: be fast, score points, and don't crash. And so far, the only thing that he has achieved is the one that you would want to not, that one criteria you wouldn't want to fulfill, which is crash, as we saw in Imola in qualifying. And he's almost been at 99% since then. And that critical percent is so important in F1. And that's why he seemingly is so far off the pace at the moment. He's just trying to kind of bed in, get up to speed. So we don't, it's very difficult to know exactly what's been said behind closed doors. But the big concern is, as things look at the moment, it's very difficult to make the argument that he is a step up on Jack. And that was the whole kind of point of bringing him into the car, is that we're not happy with Jack's performances. Yes, there's obviously outside influences like sponsorship and whatever, kind of endorsement money that could come through the door, because he is obviously heavily backed from South America. But yeah, so I think in terms of the initial question, I'm not surprised that he hasn't been as far of a step forward as people were expecting, or even a step forward from Jack. But I am a little bit surprised at just how off the pace he has been. But again, I think some of that is somewhat manufactured by almost intentionally being careful and driving within himself.
Sam,
after what happened at Imola.
Yes.
I was just to say, after what happened at Imola, that was the worst thing that could possibly have happened. Bearing in mind the crashes that he had towards the end of last season when he was with Williams, and then to come in his first Grand Prix weekend and having been given that instruction by Flavio Briatore, as Sam's just mentioned, and the very first thing he does, pretty much one of the very first things he does in a main session, Q1 in qualifying, he goes and crashes. Crikey, that must have really hurt his confidence to a certain extent. And then, as Sam's pointed out, we saw him so slow across the Monaco Grand Prix weekend. I almost feel he was being over careful. So hopefully now he's come through Spain and he did build up a degree of confidence in Spain. Hopefully we're going to see a lot more of him, but also we need to see a lot more of him because he's got so much to prove, I feel.
Well, only time will tell. My saying of the year returns once again. Sam, Ian, amazing stuff as always. And of course, for the fans watching this video, please do smash the like button, subscribe to the channel. And if you've got any fan questions coming out of this weekend's Canadian Grand Prix, please do chuck them in the comment section below any of the F1 updates. We do look at all the comments, and of course, we can pick out your questions from there. The only thing left to say is from Sam, Ian, and I. We'll see you this weekend for the Canadian Grand Prix. See you later.
Take care as always, folks.
Thanks for joining us.